Welcome back to a timey-wimey pod where we watch every episode of Doctor Who from 2005 onwards. My name's Rebecca,
My name's Haley.
and today we are discussing Series 2, Episode 7, The Idiot's Lantern.
And this episode is an episode where a lot of people have differing opinions on how they feel about it.
Definitely. It's definitely a filler episode, but I'm all for filler episodes when they're good. But yeah, people have a lot of feelings. I feel like people either really like it and enjoy it or they really don't like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Are you ready for some fantastic facts?
Yes, I am.
So this aired May 27th, 2006 and was written by Mark Gatiss, making this our second Mark Gatiss episode, his first being The Unquiet Dead in Series 1.
Mark Gatiss is a Doctor Who writer we'll see again, and he definitely has some interesting stories he brings to the show. But yeah, he's very much hit or miss for me.
I agree. He's a big fan of the show and he's involved in so many ways. But his episodes are definitely a hit or miss. It's really interesting. And this was directed by Euros Lynn, once again. When Mark Gatiss first started writing the episode, he was writing it for the 9th Doctor because he didn't know at the time that Chris was regenerating or Chris was leaving and they were regenerating. So the episode would have been called The Sonic Doom, and it would have had 9 in rows at the birth of rock and roll, and there would be teenagers that were terrorized by a living song. But then they rewrote it and they wanted to focus on television, and because Queen Elizabeth's coronation was such a big deal, they decided to focus it on that.
Why is the original plot, like the Sonic Doom plot, giving the Devil's Cord?
Right? That's exactly what I was thinking. It's kind of funny to think about this episode with the 9th Doctor.
Yeah, it's really... It would be a much different dynamic.
It really would. There's a whole alternate universe where this whole season we have Christopher Eccleston instead of David Tennant.
That is a wild thought.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Me either. I mean, it would be great, but it would also be so weird because I'm so used to David.
Totally.
In this season.
My next fantastic fact is that The Wire, played by Maureen Lipman, was modeled specifically after the British TV presenter Sylvia Peters, who was one of the BBC's primary announcers from 1947 to 1958.
Oh, I like that they had homage to her.
Mm-hmm. And when you look up Sylvia Peters, the resemblance is uncanny. They did a pretty good job. Margaret John, who plays Grandma Connolly in this episode, also appeared in the show in 1968 in a second Doctor story called Fury from the Deep.
That's cool that they brought her back.
I was reading about this in an article from 2016, and it said she held the record from the longest time in between appearances on the show. But I feel like that's been taken over by William Russell after his appearance in Power of the Doctor, but we'd have to check. But I feel like he actually has the record now.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's all the fantastic facts.
Well, in a plot twist, I have a fantastic fact.
Ooh, let's hear it.
So I accidentally stumbled upon it through a post on Reddit. I was looking for Reddit reviews for this episode, and someone was talking about a scene that they remembered being in this episode that was seemingly taken out of it, which is not true because the scene they were talking about is a scene from something called a TARDISode. A TARDISode, combination of the words TARDIS and episode.
Love it.
Were mini episodes which served as prologues for each episode of Series 2. They were made available serially with a new one debuting in the week prior to the episode to which they were attached. They were primarily meant to be seen on mobile telephones and were released to paying phone subscribers first. As each week progressed, however, the BBC made them available as webcasts. So these mini Tardisodes never featured the Doctor or Rose. It always featured characters from that episode or kind of like a
Mm.
prologue moment. But there's one for every single episode in Series 2, starting with New Earth, and they can be found on YouTube.
Oh, how have I never heard of this or seen these? Oh my gosh.
I know. When I found this out last night, I literally had to stop myself from like screaming because like I couldn't believe I didn't ever find out about this until now. And it's it's crazy.
Wow, I'm so excited. That's one great thing about the show is it is physically impossible to consume all the media, all the episodes, all the books, all the audio dramas. I would like to see one person who has done it all and seen all the spin-offs, every single episode. I'm sure there's someone, but it's mostly impossible, and I kind of love that.
I agree with you. That's something I really love about the show too, is that it never fully ends, no matter where you're
Mhm.
at watching the show. And the scene that was for the Idiot's Lantern is Grandma Connolly being sucked into the TV.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy because I was going to talk about how jarring it is that we see Grandma Connolly all normal and the next thing we know she's like faceless upstairs knocking about.
Yeah. So there was a scene. There was a scene.
That you're you're blowing my mind. That's crazy.
I know. Like I said, last night I was freaking out when I found all of this out and literally through a random Reddit post from years ago.
Wow. That's crazy.
Shout out
Well,
Reddit. You're the real one on the Doctor Who subreddit.
we love Reddit. Are you ready to jump into the episode?
Yes, I am.
I feel like there's only one place we can start, and that is Rose's outfit.
It is iconic. It is perfect. Her hair, the headband, her skirt, the jean jacket. Everything about this is perfect.
Her little shoes with the bows and the
Mm-hmm.
tights, and the headband. And can we talk about the TARDIS blue scooter and how the Doctor had a pink helmet for Rose?
I love it so
It's
much.
so cute. David's hair looks fantastic. They both look great. They're so cute throughout this episode. Rose looks fantastic. The dress, it's so iconic. I feel like this is the number one cosplay I see, if not like
Mm-hmm.
top 3 for sure. So it's in the Doctor Who outfit Hall of Fame, no doubt.
Yes, it is.
So cute. I love them.
Me too.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about our overall thoughts of this episode because I watched this yesterday and I went into it being like, okay, the Idiot's Lantern, like, not one of my favorites, but I don't hate it like other people hate it. And when I got done with it, I was like, okay, I have my criticisms that I've always had that we'll talk about later, but I had a really good time watching this. And like, this is a really fun episode to watch.
I have actually always really enjoyed this episode, and I know that's not something you've always shared with me, which is perfectly okay. Like, you're allowed to feel however you want about a Doctor Who episode. But I do think this is one of those filler episodes that's just a fun time in the
Mm-hmm.
50s. You don't have to think much. It's just very easy to watch, and I enjoy watching it every time. I do have like one criticism that we'll get to, and I know this is your criticism or one of your criticisms as well, and I think it's widely criticized.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because of where this episode hits is why it's on the lower end of people's ratings, because after
Mm-hmm.
this we get the Impossible Planet, the Sandpit, but then we get Love and Monsters and Fear Her. And I just feel like from here through the rest of the series, it's not as strong of an episode run.
Mm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I feel like this episode encompasses a lot of the issues with series 2 as a whole, where series 2 is really fun and there's some great moments and it has a ending that we will talk about. and David and Billy are great. And that is kind of why we're all here. But from a story perspective, from a writing perspective, it's not as strong as series 1 in my opinion. And this episode kind of follows that. Like, it's not the strongest written episode. The villain maybe isn't the best villain or the most compelling, but David and Billy are great. They look great, they sound great, and there's still a lot of really fun moments.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that. I do agree that it's not the strongest episode. It could have been made stronger. And I also agree that series 2 as a whole just kind of falls flat for me, episode
Mhm.
and story wise.
I agree. And we'll talk about this more in our wrap up. There's a lot of great moments, and I'm really excited about the next 2 episodes because those are fantastic episodes. And there's still more good episodes to come this series, but it's not the strongest. I would say this is probably one of his weaker series as a whole.
I agree with you.
So Rose and Ten were supposed to go to New York, which now I just really want Rose and Ten in New York.
That's exactly what I thought. I forgot about that moment. And they were supposed to see Elvis,
Hmm.
and it would have just been such a great episode.
I also, Rose mentioned something about Vegas, and I also want to see them go to Vegas.
Please, please.
Uh,
Some doctor at some point go to Vegas. It's calling you.
it's kind of crazy. We've never had a Vegas episode. Like, what?
I know. And I know. It's a British based TV show.
Hmm.
We're Americans. But you can't argue that Vegas is not a perfect location.
I've also always wanted like an early 1920s, 1930s Hollywood episode. I feel like we're really missing that.
Yes, we are. We need it.
Okay. Let's talk about the Connolly family. What are your thoughts on the Connolly family?
I think Rita says it best towards the end of the episode,
Mm.
where she says, "This whole time, I thought there's monsters outside, but it turns out the real monster in the house is you," talking to Mr. Connolly. That kind of encapsulates their family as a whole because Mr. Connolly is just awful and an abusive husband, an abusive father, and you can see the effect he has on his wife and son.
Oh yeah. Like this poor family. It's so sad. And everything that happens with Grandma Connolly is so sad. And how she's like locked upstairs and then taken away because someone ratted her out. We'll get to that later. And then
Yeah.
there's just poor Tommy who's so sweet and kind and wants to do the right thing. And I love the speech he gives later to his dad, where he
Mm-hmm.
reads the man to filth and basically calls him out for becoming the same fascist that he was fighting against. Um, and I love that moment, and we'll talk more about it later. And yeah, you're right. Rita nailed it with that line as well. And I love the scene where she's finally kicking him out.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a great moment.
I will say the when they're in the house and all we hear is the banging coming from upstairs, that is genuinely scary.
100%. So, our monster of the week is known as the Wire, and the Wire basically steals people's faces, for lack of a better explanation.
And
I don't
their
really get it
energy,
fully.
I guess. I think they said that.
Yeah, their brain energy or something about that.
Yeah.
But what was your reaction watching this episode for the first time and seeing the blank faces? Because it wigs me out the first time.
Oh, it's so unsettling. It's so creepy. Like, it's so weird to just see a face with nothing there. It's really trippy. But the effects kind of hold up. Like, it doesn't look bad from an effects perspective.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I need to talk more about the fact that the doctor has a TARDIS blue scooter. I think it's so cute. And I love when Tin and Rose are chasing the car, and I love the little comment he makes after where Rose is like, oh, there's something, like, everyone has a television, like, what's going on? And 10 is like, that's what I like
Yep.
about you, the domestic approach. And Rose not knowing if it's an insult. Such a great moment. And I just love them on the TARDIS blue scooter. It's so iconic.
It's such a great, iconic scene. And I also love how at the end of this episode, Tin tells Rose, in response to her asking if they're going to go see the coronation up close, he's like, that's all pomp and circumstance. I prefer the domestic approach.
Oh, I love it. So good. So good. Also,
Yeah.
when they show up to the Connolly house and we get the iconic hi, one of their best moments. It's so good. I love it every time.
It makes me laugh every single time. And I love how Rose yells at Mr. Connolly and is like, you have hands. You can put up the Union Jack flag. But like also you're doing it wrong. And I love that she does that.
No, I love how they both tear into him because the doctor goes on his whole thing about how, well, do you think the queen does the housework? And he's like, no, of course not. And so, and then Rose, like you said, tears into him about the Union Jack versus the Union flag. I love it. It's so good. He needed to be humbled.
Yeah, both of them just like humbling Mr. Connolly is the best. And, as always, Tin and Rose realize something is going on in this house. And they really realize it as soon as the doctor talks to Rita. And she's like, my mom, she's been taken.
I also just love later on when Mr. Connolly is like, I'm talking, and Ten's like, and I'm not listening. So good. Iconic moment.
Such a great moment. And as Rita continues to tell Tin about how her mom's face is blank, Men in Black storm the flat and take Grandma Connolly out of there. They put a blanket over her, and in the process of getting her out, Ten gets punched and just like passes out. And Rose is like trying to shake him awake.
Out.
I'm like, you're a Time Lord. Shouldn't you be stronger?
If I was Rose, I would have gotten the egg because why were you down? Like, he got knocked out so bad. He was gone from one punch.
And did you notice once he eventually came to, he like rose up, like he didn't even wake up. He was like, I'm here, I'm awake.
Yeah, exactly. No, like they fully leave and he's still like knocked out cold, basically.
Yeah, but he still has time from the time he like comes to when the car is driving away to actually go after the car, which I find funny. He was knocked out for so long, but just conveniently, he woke up when he needed to.
How convenient. And this is where Ten and Rose split up in the episode because Rose, the smart girl we know her to be, notices that something's up with the TVs.
She does. She called it when they first got to London and noticed how many people had antennas for tellies. And she's like, this doesn't sound right. People didn't have TVs like this back during the coronation. And when she notices the TV, like you mentioned, she gets a closer look at it. Then Mr. Connolly is like, hey, get out. But Rose realizes all of this has to do with a guy called Magpie who has a TV store. And she goes there to do a little girly investigating.
We love it. What do you think of Magpie?
He's weird and kind of creepy.
He's, to me, I refer to him in my notes as a weak little man. And I kind of stand by that. Like, yeah, he was being tormented by the wire, but it's like, get a grip. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, like the wire said you could keep your face and that's the only reason you're doing this.
Yeah, you're gonna let her take everyone else's face? And then what? What are you gonna do?
Exactly. I would be like, take my face. No one needs it
Yeah.
that much.
I'm fine. Just
Yeah.
he should have just turned off the TV.
That's actually a great point. Did anyone at any point, I wasn't paying close enough attention in this
It
episode.
probably she could probably turn it on and off herself.
Yeah,
Who knows?
she definitely could. But then Rose is like, tell me what's going on. And Magpie is like, please leave. And Rose is like, no, like, tell me what's going on. And then he locks her in. And as he locks her in, he's literally an accessory to the wire. Okay.
No,
It's not even about his
literally.
face anymore. The wire steals Rose's face.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we see 10, with the detectives investigating what's going on. And they lead him to where they have all the people who lost their faces. They're just standing around in a cage.
Yeah. And there's not even anyone watching over them. They're just standing there.
No chair, no bed, nothing. They just have them in a cage all together.
Yeah. Which it's like, okay, but like, what if they started going crazy? Why are you keeping them
There
all
wasn't
locked up
even a
together?
doctor there. They had nothing.
They had nothing. And when Chen is like, why haven't you been investigating to the detective? He's like, there's lots of eyes in London because of the coronation. And honestly, why does that matter?
I know. I feel like the faceless people should be a bigger priority. Like, why is it only these two detectives that are working on this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand it.
And then, as they're talking, they bring in a new person who lost their face. And immediately, we know that it's Rose. And the doctor immediately knows that it's Rose. And this is one of my favorite scenes. I love the way that the detective's voice just kind of fades out and the doctor's not listening to them anymore. And they're like, "Oh, do you know her?" And he's like, "Know her? Like, this is my friend." And he's just like looking at Rose, and we see him getting angrier and angrier. And his anger that she was left out on the street is my favorite part. It's so good. And I love when he says, "Well, that makes things very simple because now there is nothing stopping me from." Oh, I forget what the line is, but
There's no power on this earth that can stop me.
It's so good. I love it. The way he gets angry and then just storms off, and uh like I can't get over how upset he is that they just left her out on the streets.
This entire scene always has me in a chokehold. And just going for vengeance. It just shows how much he loves Rose.
No, it's so good. And you're right. Like now that they mess with Rose, like there's nothing stopping him, and I love how protective he gets. It's it's so good.
If nothing else, Mark Gatiss is a 10 row shipper. Unlike
Oh,
Stephen Moffat.
yeah. I've actually been watching some Stephen Moffat interviews randomly recently, and he does talk quite nicely of Rose and the Doctor. So maybe we need to stop that rumor. But
Moffat,
Mark
I'm
Gatiss,
sorry.
we're sorry, Moffat. But yeah, Mark Gatiss has given us some great Dr. Rose moments. So I guess we have to thank him for that, if nothing else.
Yeah.
He gave us "I'm So Glad I Met You" and "The Unquiet Dead." And
Yes.
you look beautiful.
You are correct. You are
Yeah.
correct. Thanks are due to Mark Gatiss. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark Gatiss, for this one thing.
And the next thing we know, it is the actual coronation day for Queen Elizabeth II.
We see the Doctor go back to the Connolly house to try to talk to Tommy to understand what happened to his gran. And this is where we find out that Mr. Connolly is a rat. and he was ratting out all his neighbors and friends to the authorities, and he ratted out his own mother-in-law. And the way he talks about her, when she's like, she's filthy, she's disgusting, she's a monster. And then the way Rita goes, she's my mother. Like, oh, it's so heartbreaking. And you feel so bad for Rita that her husband is like attacking her mom just because, something bad happened to her. And oh, and this is also where Tommy gives his great speech. Like, you fought so little twerps like me could exist and run around and do whatever. And he really just calls him out for becoming the fascist that he was supposedly fighting against. And it's a really great moment. I think it's underrated.
I agree with you. The whole speech that Tommy has is really well acted and really well written, and it's a highlight of this episode for me.
Mm-hmm. Then 10 realizes what Rose realized hours ago, that it all leads back to the TVs and Mr. Magpie. And I love when he goes barging in the shop, he breaks it, he slams that bell. Ooh, it's so good.
It is. And something I didn't mention at the beginning when we were talking about how Euros Lynn directed this episode, I really like how he directed it with like all the different angles, which is a bit different than the other episodes he's done this series.
Yeah, definitely. When reading about this, I came across an interview with Mark Gatiss, and he said that when they were filming, he was a little unsure about all the different angles, but that he's really happy with how it came out, and he really likes what Euroslyn did with it. And I agree.
The moment where Tin sees all the faces trapped in the televisions and magpies, for some reason, is a really interesting scene to me, but also really weird.
It is really weird just to see everyone's face and nothing else.
Yeah, their face, not their hair, nothing.
Mm-hmm. And everyone we see calling for help, help me, help. And then he sees Rose, and she's calling for the doctor.
It's so good.
I love throughout this episode, or towards the end, I guess, where they like intersplice clips from the coronation. I think that's really fun, and I like seeing the real life footage.
Me too. We love our Queen Lizzie. May she rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Queen.
Can we talk about The Wire a little bit more, though?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's established in the Magpie store scene that The Wire is trapped in the TV, but she's not strong enough yet to get out of the TV. And so because of that, Magpie takes like a portable telly to go to like the TV tower to like transmit it all over London.
Yeah. Okay, here's my problem with The Wire. It's a really interesting concept when you look at the bones of it. It's really interesting. I like that they take someone and they model her off of someone who would have been really recognizable on television at the time. That's really interesting. I love the part where it's she turns to colored TV for a second, and they're all like, oh my gosh, colored TV. Like, that's really funny. But I don't think the execution is done very well. The whole feed me, like, it's a little it's like they're trying to make a scary catchphrase, and it's just coming out camp in not the best way. And yeah, you're right, the plan is very confusing. I never really understand like what they're doing, why they're doing this, why she needs the faces, what the goal is. So I think it's a good concept, just not really executed very well.
I concur with you. And also, like, the ending of all of it, where Tin and Tommy team up, save the day together. I'm still confused what they do. Like, what Tin does. Like, he just screws something on the television the wire's in. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so we see Ten and Magpie like on the Oh yeah, the tower. So they're on the tower, and then Magpie like dies, and then it seems like Ten's plan fails, but then we see Tommy, he does like something, and then everything's
Yeah,
fine. So it's wrapped up in a really confusing way.
it is. It's a confusing moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also really confused on how like all the faces get back to the people. Like obviously all the people whose faces were stolen were alive the whole time, but like at the end of this episode all their faces are returned and so they're back to normal and I just want to know like how that works. Like just canceling
Oh
out the
yeah.
wire.
Especially because
Be-
it makes sense. We see like Rita and her friends, like their faces start to get taken away, but then like they stop it. But then how do all the people in the cage get their face back?
I agree. And I mean, there had to have been a decent amount of people because as Tin and Tommy were like trying to stop the wire, more people were getting sucked into the TV because of the
Hmm.
coronation.
Right. Yeah. See, there's a few issues for sure
Yeah,
in this. I think the third act in general, I'm realizing, is a little rushed, a little kind of thrown together.
I agree with you.
But I do love the 10 Rose reunion we get.
Mm-hmm. The hug.
The hug.
Nothing beats it.
No, it's so good. The way they just run towards each other and hug, and his smile is so big. It's so cute. I love
Mm-hmm.
it.
And they're so happy together. And like I said, Tin mentions he loves the domestic approach and how
Mhm.
they're there in the street celebrating with everyone
Yeah.
there. And there's like a table and everyone's outside. And it's a great ending. And that's my
Mhm.
official ending to this episode
Yeah.
in
It
my
should have
mind.
just ended at the party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk
Okay,
about it?
let's talk about it. We get the great moment of Rita kicking him out and being like, "It was never your house. It was in my mom's name." So on her behalf,
Mm-hmm.
get out. Iconic. Get him, Rita. So good. And I love seeing his sad self leaving with his sad little suitcase and Tommy being like, "Good riddance." But
Mm-hmm.
then Rose, or dear Rose, she's like, go to him. And I just really hate this because Mr.
Yeah.
Connolly has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. They do not give us one sliver of goodness in this man, not a slither of humanity or any reason we should feel sorry for him, we should root for him, we should understand him. He is just a horrible person through and through. And it's like, why would we send his son back to him? Why are we sending this kid back to his abuser essentially? And for what? Because he's his dad? Okay. And so I no, I hate it, but I want to hear what you think.
Oh, I feel exactly the same way you do. And I don't understand why it was written like this because,
Mhm.
yes, Rose has many feelings about dads. You know, she grew up without having her dad present. He died when she
Yeah.
was really little. She's met her dad, she's met Parallel World Pete. Like, she has that, but just because of that backstory doesn't necessarily mean that in every circumstance she's going to be like to every kid in every situation, go back to your dad, especially if he was abusive. Because Mr. Connolly,
Mhm.
it's not like he was just, maybe not saying the most nicest things. He was genuinely abusive.
Oh
Like you
yeah.
said, there's no redeeming quality. Rita kicked him out. She was terrified Mary to him. Tommy was
Mhm.
terrified of his father. Why is he going just because it's his dad? Maybe not have that be the message.
Yeah, like maybe the message should be like, "Yay, we're free of all the monsters in our lives now, and maybe now we can rebuild and heal." But no, it's like, "Oh, just go back and carry his suitcase after all he did was yell at you, turn your gran in, belittle and scream at your mother all day long, and like belittle you in front of everyone, tell you can't go to college, and
Yeah.
threaten to, beat you in front of your family and friends watching the coronation. Like, no, I hate it. Mark Gatiss, you missed the mark with this one. Oh my gosh, I did not mean that to be a pun, but it did. You really missed the mark. I hate to say it, but yeah, I hate this ending.
I do as well. And honestly, I mentioned this in passing before. Sometimes I'm a little delulu and make my own endings in my mind. And like I said, this is one of those episodes where the ending for me is when Rose and Tin are reunited, Rita kicks Mr. Connolly out, then it's the end.
Yeah, I agree. What is the heart of this episode for you?
That it's okay to get rid of the monsters in our own house. Not saying that everyone has monsters in their own house, because that's like a very big blanket statement. But
Yeah.
like, if there's a monster in your house, like Mr. Connolly was, it's okay to,
Yeah.
kick them out.
Yeah. But don't be like Mr. Connolly and think your mother-in-law, who had her face stolen, is the monster, because you're the monster and you should be kicked out, not the poor faceless grandma.
Exactly.
Who is the star of the show?
That's actually a great question. Because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I really like Rita in this episode, even though she
Yeah.
doesn't have the most scenes. And I really I like Tommy, but I don't know if I'd say he's like my favorite character.
I'd agree. I think I'm going to give it to Tommy just because he does literally save the day. And he is a really sweet kid, and I really like the speech he gives, and how he tries to help his mom and his gran. So he's just a sweet little kid. So I'll give it to him. And he literally does save the world. So yeah,
You know what? I'll agree with you on that.
he's the star of the show.
He is the star of the show.
Do we have any reviews from the past?
Yes, we do, and they are from IMDb.
Oh.
In a May 28th, 2006 review, user Jim Z said, I've been a little disappointed with the last couple of weeks of Doctor Who. The Cyberman story just didn't seem to cut it for me, especially after the girl in the fireplace. But the Idiot's Lantern just completely redeemed the series for me.
Oh.
I know, I was actually really surprised at some of these 2006 reviews,
Mm.
just how positive they were. But the Idiot's Lantern just completely redeemed the series for me. I thought the way that this episode was put together was absolutely amazing. I'm a bit of an obsessive when it comes to 50s culture and music, and this managed to pull it off brilliantly. Skipping ahead in their review, they said, Mark Gatiss did an absolutely fantastic job of writing this episode. It was brilliantly done, enough to terrify millions of small kids into not watching TV for fear of having their faces sucked off.
Oh, that's really funny. I never really thought about that. It's because we
Me
watched
either.
it when we were a little bit older. I kind of like don't pick up on all the like scary things. But yeah, if you saw this as like a
Same.
little kid, you probably were really scared.
Yeah, you're right. I forget about that factor sometimes too, watching these episodes.
Yeah.
They continue in saying, I thought David Tennant was amazing in this episode as ever.
Mm-hmm.
I also agree with that.
Me too.
Billie Piper was also great last night. I'm not particularly a big fan of hers, but she excelled herself last night. Brilliant episode. Let's just hope the rest of the series is at the same standard. Are you ready for this next review?
I'm ready.
So this is from February 9th, 2015, from the user Zach Petch. He said, bit of a mess, this one. Then he kind of recaps the plot, and then later down in his review, he says, there's also an uninteresting subplot about the Connolly family with a father who is stuck in his ways and an annoying son that does nothing throughout but be annoying. I've said about child actors being irritating and rubbish, and sadly, this is another child that only serves to enforce this stereotype.
Oh my
And then at
gosh.
And then at the end, he gets given some advice from Rose regarding how to respond to parents. Of all the characters out there, why would any sane person go to Rose for this kind of advice? I don't get that. I just cannot comprehend of why someone would trust Rose, of all people, on these issues. It only highlights further just how irritating Rose is.
Well, Tommy doesn't know that Rose is fatherless. And I think the actor did a fine job. I would not put him as an annoying child actor. I think he did a fine job.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, the advice is really terrible.
It is. He continues in saying, this episode has a very loud but not menacing villain, poor effects for the faceless people, poor writing. If it were a movie, then it would clean up at the Razzies with two exceptions. The lead actor and director, David Tennant and Euroslim, respectively. These two saved the production from being an utter garbage heap of rotten manure. Mark Gatiss is consistently a bad writer for the show. He should stop writing Doctor Who and just focus on Sherlock. Please, Mr. Gatiss, if you're reading this, do what I've suggested.
Well, he might not be wrong, but Mark Gatiss has his moments.
He has his moments, and I think it's a
Yeah.
little harsh to say would clean up at the Razzies. If
Yeah,
you
I
guys
haven't heard a
don't know,
Razzies reference in a while.
I know. If you're listening and you're unfamiliar with the Razzies, basically it's an award show for like the worst moments from like movies or like the cringiest moments.
Mhm.
So that's what the reference is. Do I think Mark Gatiss is the strongest Doctor Who writer? No.
No.
But I do think this review is harsh and could have been
Yeah.
worded differently to be a bit
That-
nicer.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, overall, I will say like the initial IMDb reviews, there's not a ton, but the initial reviews are pretty positive. Some are like, this is really great. Others were like, this was really good. There wasn't a lot of like reviews of people not liking it until like later on, which I just think is because more people discovered the show and ranked on IMDb.
Yeah, and I can see like over like in 2006 I could see more people really liking this and then it not really aging the best over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on this episode?
I don't think so. I think that wraps this episode up. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think so, but thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back next week with The Impossible Planet.
Yes, we will. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at timeywimeypod and email us anything and everything to timeywimeypod@gmail.com.
And if you happen to, please give us a review. Give us 5 stars if you so please. We'd really appreciate it. And we'd love to hear from you. And let us know what you think about this episode because I'm really curious what people think because I feel like it is a little divisive at times.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know what you guys think, and we will talk to you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.